My name is Rachel, and I am 74 years old. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in one of those quiet, forgettable neighborhoods where every house looks the same and everyone waves at each other from driveways, but nobody really knows anybody. I was the kind of kid who did her homework on time, never caused trouble, and genuinely believed, then genuinely a good person, and worked hard and loved people right. Life with Tinkak, then belief held for a long time. Then I married Daniel, and it took me 5 years to figure out that some people will look you in the eyes every single day and lie. I met Daniel when I was 20. He was 17. We were at a mutual friend's birthday party at this crowded bar downtown. The kind of hearing in close to hear anything the other person is saying. He leaned in and asked me what I did for work. I told him I was a middle school hand teacher. He smiled like that, the most instinct thing anyone had ever said to him. That smile. That was the first lie he ever told me, though I did not know it yet. Daniel was tall, 6'2", broad shoulders, dark brown hair that always fell slightly across his forehead. He had this calm about him, this steadiness that felt incredibly attractive to me at the time. He was a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company in downtown Columbus. He was good at his job, he told me. He was modest about it in that performative way that men are when they want you to keep asking questions. I kept asking questions. We dated for a year and a half. He was attentive. He remembered small details. He showed up. He met my parents and charmed my mother inside of 20 minutes. My dad, who is suspicious of everyone, shook his hand at the end of that first dinner and said, "He seems solid." I thought my dad was right. I thought Daniel was the most solid person I had ever known. We got married when I was 29. Small wedding, 70 people. A venue outside the city, with these beautiful white lights strung across an open barn. My sister cried during the vows. Daniel's mom cried. I cried. It was one of the best days of my life, and I want to be clear about that, because sometimes when I tell this story, I feel like people assume I must have been miserable from the beginning. I was not. I was genuinely happy. That is the part that makes all of this so hard. The first 2 years of our marriage were normal. We bought a house in Westerville, a suburb north of Columbus. 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, a kitchen that needed updating. We talked about kids. We got a house plant and kept alive, which felt like a victory. We fell into a routine, flickering on. He went to work. We had dinner together most nights. We watched too much television on weekends. It and ordinary, and I loved it. The thing about Daniel is that he was good at compartmentalizing. I see that now. At the time, he was a private person. He did not talk much about his coworkers. He almost never named people from the office by name. If I asked how his day was, he would say, fine, or busy, and then change the subject to something about the house or what we were having for dinner. I thought that was normal. I thought some did not print their work home with them. I did not think as a red flag. The first thing I noticed was the phone. About 2.5 years into our marriage, Daniel started taking his phone everywhere. I mean everywhere. Into the bathroom when he showered. Into the garage when he went to check on something. Face down on the nightstand when we slept. I noticed because it was a change. Before, his phone would just sit on the kitchen counter. He would leave it in the car when we went to restaurants. He was not attached to it. I noticed the change and I found it away. I did not say anything. I am not the kind of person who snoops or accuses without evidence. I told myself he dealing with something stressful at work. There was a big project he had mentioned once, something with a deadline coming up. I told myself it was that. Then there was the late nights. He had always come by 6:30, sometimes 7. Suddenly it was 8, then 9, sometimes 9:30. He would text me saying he was stuck on something. That a meeting ran over, that he was sorry and would be home soon. I would heat up dinner and wait. He would come in looking tired and distracted and eat without saying much. I would ask if he wanted to talk about it. He would say, "Not tonight, Rachel. I am exhausted." I would say, "Okay." I was always saying okay. Then there was a Saturday in October. He said he had to go into the office for a few hours. On a Saturday, I said, "Really?" He said yes, the project was behind. His manager needed him. It was temporary. He was gone for 6 hours. He came home smelling like a restaurant. Not food specifically. Just the general smell of somewhere that cooked things and poured drinks. I asked where he had gone for lunch. He said the vending machine. I looked at him and he looked back at me, and something passed between us that I still cannot name. Not a fight, just a recognition. Like we both knew something was wrong, and neither of us was ready to say it out loud. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Something is wrong, I thought it. Just those 3 words, over and over. Something is wrong. I had no idea how right I was. It was a Tuesday in March. I remember the days. I had just come home from a frustrating parent. Teacher conference where a father had spent 20 minutes arguing with me about his son's grade and an art project on. I was tired and a little irritated, and all I wanted was to change out of my work clothes and sit on the couch for an hour before I started dinner. Daniel was not home yet, which was not unusual anymore. 7 o'clock had become the new normal for him, sometimes 8. I had stopped making dinner and started cooking just for myself, flickering on, leaving the leftovers in without saying anything about it. That is how we communicated by then. Through leftovers and silences and a politeness that had replaced actual conversation. I was in the bedroom when I almost did not answer it. I was pulling on a sweatshirt, and I thought it was probably a delivery. But then it rang again. I went downstairs and opened the door. A woman was standing on my porch. She was maybe 29, 28. Blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She was wearing a gray maternity top and dark leggings. She was visibly, unmistakably pregnant. 7 months. I would find out later. At the time, I just registered the roundness of her stomach and the look on her face, which was terrified and determined at the same time. Like she had rehearsed this moment and was forcing herself through it. I said, "Can I help you?" She said, "Is this Rachel's house?" Rachel Calloway, my maiden name. I had taken Daniel's last name when we married. I had been Calloway until I was 29. The fact that she knew my home made the back of my neck go cold in a way I could not explain. "That is me," I said. "I go by Rachel Mercer now." Something moved across her face. I watched her register that information. Her jaw tightened. She looked down at the ground for a second and then back up at me. "I need to talk to you," she said, "about Daniel. Here is the thing about those moments. The moments right before your life changes. People always say they felt it coming, that there was some instinct that warned them. I am telling you honestly then, I did not feel it coming. I felt confused. I felt a low level concerns away when someone calls at an odd hour. Not full alarm, just a slight wrongness. I still thought, in that moment, that this could be something explainable. A coworker, a work dispute, a misunderstanding of some kind. I let her in. I do not know why. I just stepped back and opened the door wider, and she walked into my house and stood in my entryway looking around at the photos on the wall, at our wedding picture on the little sign table, at the life I had been sent these walls. Her face did something complicated when she saw the wedding photo. I asked if she wanted to sit down. She said yes. We went to the kitchen. I did not offer her anything to drink because my hands were shaking, and I did not trust myself to pour a glass of water without spilling it. Her name was Brianna, she said in plainly, just her first name, like I might already know it. I did not. In 5 years. Daniel had never mentioned Brianna. In 5 years of marriage. I had heard a handful of coworker names. She was not one of them. She folded her hands on the table. She looked me in the eyes, and she said, I am married to Daniel. We got married 14 months ago. I did not know you until last week. I need you to know that. I had no idea he was already married. The kitchen was very quiet. I heard the refrigerator hum. I heard a car go by outside. I heard my own breathing. I said, What? She said, He told me he was divorced. He showed me paperwork. I do not know now if it was real or forged or what. But we got married at the courthouse in Dublin 14 months ago, and I am 7 months pregnant with his baby. Last week, I found a photo on his laptop, a photo of the two of you at your wedding. She paused. Your wedding was before ours. I sat across from this woman, and I felt my body go very still in that specific way does when it is protecting it itself from something too large to process all at once. Like a circuit breaker tripping before the whole system blows. I said, Show me. She had everything on her phone. The marriage certificate. A photo of herself and Daniel at what looked like a small courthouse ceremony. She was wearing a simple white dress. He was wearing a gray suit. He was smiling. The same smile he had given me at that birthday party when I told him I was a teacher. The same exact smile. I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I looked at her stomach. I said, How long have you been together? She said, 2 years. We met at work. 2 years, which meant it started 6 months into our marriage, which meant there was no ning project. No late nights, no stressed out work weeks. There was Brianna. I stood up from the table. I walked to the sink. I ran the cold water and put my hands under it because I needed to feel something real and solid, and that was the only thing I could think of. Cold water, my own hands behind me, Brianna said quietly. I am so sorry. I did not know. I swear to you I did not know. I believed her. I do not know why, but I did. The terror on her face when I answered the door was not the terror of someone caught doing something wrong. It was the terror of someone who had just found out they were the victim, too. Daniel came home an hour later. He walked into the kitchen and stopped in the doorway. He saw Brianna. He saw me, and for the first time in 5 years, I watched the composure drain completely off his face. Daniel stood in the doorway for maybe 4 seconds without saying anything. 4 of the longest seconds of my life. Then he said, "Rachel," just my name, like he was trying to buy time by saying it. I said, "Sit down." He sat. He did not look at Brianna. He looked at me the entire time, which I think was deliberate. Like if he just his eyes on me, he could control what happened next. He could not. I told him what Brianna had told me. I laid it out plainly, on the way you do when you're holding yourself so tightly that the only thing keeping you together is the structure of your own sentences. I told him she had shown me the marriage certificate. I told him I had seen the photo of their courthouse wedding. I told him she was 7 months pregnant. He did not deny it. That was the thing I keep coming back to. He did not deny it. He did not say there was a mistake, or that the certificate was fake, or that there was some explanation I was not seeing. He sat at my kitchen table in the house we had bought together, and he looked at the surface of the table and he said, I know how this looks." I said, "How does it look, Daniel?" He was quiet. Brianna, who had been sitting completely still the whole time, said, "You told me you were divorced. You showed me paperwork." Daniel looked at her then, just briefly, then back at the table. I said, "Were the divorce papers real?" He said, "No." I had been holding myself together because I needed information. I needed the full shape of what had happened before I allowed myself to feel it. But that single word, that no, said so plainly, so quietly, broke something loose in my chest. I asked him when it started with Brianna. He said 2 years ago there had been a work conference in Cincinnati. They had dinner. On one thing led to another. He said he had tried to end it several times and could not. He said Brianna had given him something he did not know he was missing. He actually said that in my kitchen to my face. She gave him something he did not know he was missing. I asked him what that something was. He did not answer. I spent the next 3 days making calls and going through papers. I am not the kind of person who sits in shock. I process by doing. I called a lawyer. I pulled out every document in the house that had Daniel's name on it. I went through the filing in the home office that I had never had reason to go through before. And I found things. I found a second cell phone. It was in a box in the back of the closet, inside a winter boot that had not been worn in at least 2 seasons. It was a prepaid phone, nothing fancy. recharged it and got into it without difficulty because the password was the same as his regular phone. Our wedding anniversary, which either means he was careless or he was cruel enough to find that funny. Oh, I still do not know which. The tanks on that phone went back almost 2 years. I read enough of them to understand the full picture, and then I stopped reading because there is a limit to how much a person can absorb before it starts doing damage. Damage you cannot undo. Brianna had no idea about any of it. I need to keep saying that because it matters. She had met his family. His mother had been at their courthouse wedding. His sister had thrown Brianna a small baby shower 2 months ago. His whole family had known. Every single one of them had to me in the face at holidays and birthdays and ordinary Sunday dinners, and they had known. I called Daniel's mother. She answered on the second ring, and when she heard my voice, she went quiet in a way that told me immediately she had been waiting for this call. I asked her how long she had known. She said she had found out 8 months ago when Daniel had asked her to meet Brianna. She said she told him he needed to come clean. She said she did not know what to do. She said she was sorry. My own family did not know because Daniel and I had always kept a distance from them by accident. My parents lived in Cincinnati. My sister was in Pittsburgh. We saw them at Thanksgiving and sometimes Easter. They knew Daniel as a good husband. They had no reason to think otherwise. I called my sister. She stayed on the phone with me for 3 hours that first night. She did not tell me what to do. She did not say anything particularly wise. She just stayed on the line while I talked and cried and went silent and talked again. That is the kind of help actually helps. Daniel moved out 4 days after Brianna came to my door. He did not fight it. He packed 2 suitcases and left. He texted me from Brianna's apartment to say he was sorry and that he hoped I could forgive him someday. I read the text and as an ink in the face, down on the counter, and left it there for an hour. The forgiveness question. People would ask me that a lot over the next several months. Do you think you will forgive him? I never had a clean answer. What I knew was that forgiveness was not the first thing on my list. Survival was the first thing on my list. The divorce papers were filed within the week. Daniel did not contest anything. The hardest part was not the betrayal. I want to say it can think people expect the betrayal to be the worst thing. It was not. The betrayal was a single event, a horrible one, but it had a shape. It had a beginning and a very ugly end but you could point to it and say, that thing happened. That is what broke everything. The hardest part was the daily life after. The ordinary Tuesday mornings when I woke up and reached for a moment. In that soft, foggy place between sleep and consciousness for the shape of my old life, and then remembered it was gone. The hardest part awake and standing in front of 12-year-olds and teaching them about color theory while my whole interior world was a wreck site. The hardest part was the house. I stayed in it. A lot of people told me to sell it, to move, to start fresh somewhere new. My sister said the same thing. My lawyer gently suggested it might help psychologically to have a clean break from the space. But I was stubborn, and I was brought in the specific way of someone who has just realized her household income was about to be cut in half, and I could not afford to move. So I stayed. I repainted the bedroom myself. That helped strangely. I went to the hardware store on a Saturday morning and stood in front of the paint chips for 45 minutes and then picked a dark, deep green that was completely thing we had ever had in the house. I painted it myself over the course of a weekend with music on loud. By Sunday night, the room looked nothing like it had. That helped. My mother drove up from Cincinnati weeks after everything happened and stayed for 5 days. She cleaned my kitchen and filled my freezer with food and did not say a single thing that made me feel worse. She did not say I told you so or ask me if I had seen the signs or suggest what I should do next. She just showed up and was present and fed me. I am still grateful for that. Daniel and Brianna's baby was born in May. A girl, I found out from Daniel's sister, who had my number and her parents had obligated to tell me, which was strange and unnecessary, and also somehow exactly the kind of thing Daniel's family would do. I said thank you, and then I put her number. I had a very specific emotional response to hearing about the baby, and I want to be honest about it. I did not feel anger toward the baby. That was never where the anger was. The anger was entirely for Daniel. But I did feel something when I heard about the birth, something quiet and aging and hard to name. The marriage Daniel and I said if I'm going to survive once the truth came out. I knew that. I had known it within minutes of Brianna sitting down at my kitchen table. But there had been Daniel and I had talked about children. We had talked about it seriously. We had picked names once late at night, half joking but not entirely joking. And he had been playing that whole conversation with me while he was already building a second life with someone else. That was what made me cry in my car in the school parking lot one morning in May. Knowing his daughter existed, I saw a therapist. I want to be straightforward about that because I think it matters. I saw her every week. The following January, she was a small, precise woman named Dot. O'Keefer, who asked good questions and did not let me be vague when I was trying to avoid saying something hard. She helped me understand what I had experienced was not just infidelity. It was sustained deception. Years of it. Deliberately constructed, flickering on. And that the work that was different from healing, from a normal marriage falling apart because the ground you were standing on had been fake the whole time. You were not just losing the relationship. You were losing your version of reality. That took a long time to sit with. The divorce was finalized in September, 6 months after Brianna appeared at my door. I sat in a lawyer's office and signed papers and walked out into a parking lot and stood by my car in the September air and felt this enormous, hollowed-out feeling. Not relief, not sadness exactly, just empty. Like all the noise had stopped, and now there was just the quiet, which was somehow harder. I called my sister. She asked how I was. I said I did not know yet. She said that was okay. She said I did not have to know yet. I drove home. The house, with the dark green bedroom and the freezer full of casseroles, my mother had left, and the very ordinary, very quiet life that was now just mine. I sat on the couch for a while in the late afternoon light. Then I got up and made dinner for one, ate it at the kitchen table, and washed my dishes and went to bed. That is what surviving's like most of the time. Not cinematic, not triumphant. Just getting through the day and then the next one. I kept getting through them. It is October now. 14 months since Brianna knocked on my door. 13 months since Daniel moved out. 7 months since the divorce was finalized. I am sitting in my living room on a Sunday afternoon with the windows open because the weather is perfect. That specific October weather that feels like the air itself has taken a breath and settled on, and I am trying to figure out how to describe who I am right now versus who I was 2 years ago. Here is what I know for certain. I am different, not broken and not bitter. Though I passed through both those territories for longer than I would like to admit. Just different, changed in ways I am still mapping. My life looks simpler than it used to. The house is mine, all mine. Bought out with a divorce settlement and refinance I did on my own. I had the office redone into a pamper studio where I paint on weekends, not for any reason. Not to sell or share or build a following or anything purposeful like that. Just because I and RT used to paint before I became a wife, and somewhere in those 5 years, I stopped and I did not even notice until I started again and felt the specific kind of peace that comes from making something with your peace. Comes making something with your hands. My sister visited in August. We spent a long weekend together, doing nothing in particular, and it was one of the best visits we have ever had. Distance creates its own problems, but it also creates a specific quality of time when you are together. Every hour feels deliberate. I started running. I had never been a runner. I found it miserable the first 3 weeks, which apparently is just how running works. And then something shifted, and now I go 4 mornings a week before school. I have no idea if teen forever or if it is just something this particular version of me does. That is fine. I am giving myself permission to not have to know what forever looks like. Now, the part you have been waiting for. Daniel and Brianna are still together. As far as I know, they live in an apartment in Dublin with their daughter, who is about 8 months old now. I know this only because my divorce attorney mentioned it once in passing context, and I did not ask for more information. I genuinely have no interest in what his life looks like. That is not bitterness talking. That is clarity. What happens in his world has nothing to do with my anymore. Daniel did reach out once, in July, an email. He said he was in therapy. He said he was working through the damage he had caused. He said he was not asking for forgiveness, just wanted me to know. I read the email twice. Then I closed it and did not respond. I do not know if makes me cold or just self-protective. My therapist, doctor. Okay, first says those 2 things are not always as different as people think. Brianna and I have spoken twice since everything happened. Short conversations. She reached out in November last year, before the baby was born, just to see if I was okay. She did not have to do that. Most people in her position would not have done that. I told her I was okay, that I was getting there. She said the same. She said she was sorry again. I believe that she meant it every time she said it. There is something strange and complicated about sharing a category of victim with the woman who replaced you. It does not map onto any script I knew before. But Brianna was deceived too. She built a life on a lie ting. Her situation is harder in some ways because she has a child in it now. A baby who did not chinks, and who deserves better than a father, who is capable of the kind of sustained, deliberate dishonesty that Daniel demonstrated. I hope she figures out how to navigate. I genuinely do. My coworker Priya set me up on a date in September. I almost said no. I said yes because I have been making a practice of saying yes to things I would normally avoid. Not recklessly, but deliberately. The date was fine. He was a perfectly nice man who sold commercial real estate and had 2 dogs and very strong opinions about barbecue. We did not have a second date. That was fine too. I am not in a hurry. That is the biggest change in me, maybe. I used to be in a quiet, low, great hurry all the time, checking boxes, making sure my life matched the shape I thought it was supposed to have. Husband, house, kids coming, the whole expected trajectory. I spent 5 years inside a marriage that turned out to be a construction, a stage set. And what I found on the other side of that was not the wreckage I thought I would find. What I found was that I was staying here, still myself, still capable of friends a week and teaching 12-year-old codes about color and painting on weekends and calling my sister and eating dinner alone without it destroying me. That is more than I expected, honestly. When Brianna stood on my porch that Tuesday in March, and I let her in and sat down at my kitchen table, and my life changed completely. Flickering on, didn't it, other side of it intact. I thought it would break something in me permanently. It did not, or it did. And the break healed into something stronger than what was there before. I do not know which. I am not sure it matters. What I know is this. The finding Daniel for me, when he built his secret life, was not just the marriage. He took my confidence in my own perception. He made me doubt what I saw and heard and felt for years. Getting that back has been slow and non-linear and sometimes invisible, but it has happened. I trust myself now in a way I did not before. And I think that might be worth something. Actually, I think might be everything.